Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Tablas Creek Instagram Live conversation. I am your host, proprietor Jason Haas. My guest this week is somebody I am incredibly excited to spend some time talking to, and I'm excited for you all to get to meet. This is Tom Wark, who is he's an icon in terms of wine publicity. He is one of the pioneering wine bloggers in the wine world. All of us who write blogs related to wine owe him a debt of gratitude. But he's also one of the most outspoken and interesting voices in favor of liberalizing wine shipping, and a great puncturer of hypocrisy. Anyway, he's great. So I'm excited for you all to get to meet him. But as I always do, while we're waiting for people to join, I want to share a few pictures as to what we got going on here at the winery. So it is pretty quiet out in the vineyard. Everything is turning green from the early rain that we got. Our flock of sheep is very happy. This is a moment where you can get some pretty epic photos of the flock in the vineyard. There's one that I particularly love. Paco, our resident alpaca, along with the flock of sheep. It is really, really beautiful out there. It is not yet time to prune. It is not yet time to do anything really other than wait for full dormancy and let the cover crop grow. So meanwhile, we are working on blending. We're putting back together the wines that we're going to be bottling next week, including the Roussanne and the Esprit de Tablas Blanc and our new Panoply Blanc, which is going to be really fun. That's Caitlin up on a ladder. We started to get the cellar started to get full of bottling supplies. We'll have the kegs that we'll use for our own tasting room. And then in our tasting room, we've got a bunch of our holiday packs that we're promoting. A little bit of holiday decoration. This is a pack that I think is particularly fun, and we're seeing a lot of people interested in. This is the Vinsider for a day, so you can essentially give people a 6-bottle assortment of Tablas Creek, and it comes with a visit and the privileges of being a wine club member for your recipient when they come to visit. Okay, what else do I have? I think just really one more photo. Show you what it looks like from the top of the vineyard, looking down over the property. You can see the kind of patchwork of different blocks. You can see that kind of semi-overcast, light cloud layer sky. It's very typical for this December period. So this is what it looks like. It's beautiful out here. We've had some beautiful days. It's cold at night. We have had some frosts, but nothing that's been a hard enough freeze to really force everything into dormancy. So that's what we're waiting for. Okay, that's your quick tour. I'm going to stop sharing. I am going to invite Tom to join me. I can't wait for you to meet him. And hopefully this all works as smoothly as it did when we did our test a couple days ago. Marvelous.
How are you?
Technology is amazing when it works.
Isn't it though? You know, that was a great photo of your vineyards. You can really see the distinction between the blocks when all the leaves are off. I mean, it's a really great time to investigate vineyards right now when you can see the architecture of the vines.
I totally agree. The geometry of the vineyards becomes really clear in the winter.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we have this sort of unusual combination right now where we've still got some of the foliage kind of with autumn colors, and we've got a lot of green grass. Usually it sort of rains here and freezes here at about the same time, so we don't get much in the way of kind of green behind foliage the way that you might in a European region or even up in Oregon where you are. But it's true right now. It's pretty and unusual.
That's great. You're lucky to live there.
I agree. Awesome. Okay, so I'm not sure if you were on when I gave a very quick introduction, but for anybody who was not on there, my guest is Tom Wark, pioneering wine marketer, publicist, advocate, pioneering blogger, and self-described muckraker. So welcome, Tom. I'd love to start by asking you, was wine a part of your family life growing up? Was it on your parents' table, and how did you come to it?
So it was never on my family table, in fact. My parents both came from the Midwest, and my dad, in fact, worked for national distillers. before he came to California. So he helped make bourbon, as did his father. But the only time wine was anywhere near our home was that big jug of Sebastiani Red that sat on the top shelf. And I'll never forget it. When I was about 6 years old, I had been eyeing that jug. It looked really interesting to me, but I'm this short little dude, right? And so my mom's not in the kitchen, and I actually climb up in the pantry, climb up on the shelf to grab that thing because I thought it was something to play with. Pulled it down, crashed everywhere, and of course it was full because my mom never cooked with wine. It must have been there for decades. There I was, standing in the middle of, I don't know what it was. It must have been a couple gallons worth of wine on the floor and broken glass everywhere. And it didn't bother me. I didn't cry or anything, but my mom was upset.
So that was your introduction to wine. It was literally like you were baptized in wine at age 6.
But I got interested in wine though, actually, in the later years of high school. I can't explain why I did, but I started going up to Napa Valley. I grew up in Northern California. I would drive to Napa Valley when I was like 17 and 18 years old and go to tasting rooms, and no one ever said a thing, right? Yeah, sure, have a taste of wine, right? I never told my buddies that I was going up to Napa Valley to taste wine because that would have disqualified me for everything, right? But that's when I started, getting into wine then.
So as I understand from my research, you have a master's in diplomatic history. Is that true? And if so, what did you think you would be doing with that degree?
So I wanted to teach. I wanted to teach at the college level, and so when I was getting my master's in my last year, I was an assistant to a professor, and I got to lecture freshmen.
Yep.
But more importantly, I got to grade their papers, and I would get these paragraphs that had no verbs in them, right? and so I'm writing, okay, that's a D, and my professor told me, listen, Tom, you can't do that. You have to try to decipher whether or not they understand the material, not if they can write about it. And that's when I had this image of 30 years of academia grading freshman papers, and I said, nah, I'm not doing this. But then I had no backup plan, right? But I did have certain skills, right? I could write, I could research, I could talk. And it suggested marketing. I looked into marketing, and that suggested public relations. And then I realized that there was public relations for high tech, public relations for real estate, and public relations for wine too. I said, okay, I can do that. So I got myself a job at a wine PR firm, and that's when it happened. That's when I started working in.
I'm curious. So that was like what, like early 90s?
I got my first job in the wine business in 1990. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm curious, what were in that era, what were the stories that it was important for wine to be telling?
You know what's interesting about wine is the production of wine and the kind of people who make wine has not changed for centuries, right? The grapes get crushed, the juice comes out, we ferment it more or less successfully, depending on the equipment that we have. And then we sell it to people who, instead of drinking bourbon or rye or beer or ale, choose to drink wine. So, and it's always been about place too. So the stories, from 1990 to now, the stories that are told about wine do not change. They're always about place or people. And I think that's what draws people to wine in a lot of cases, right? Is the diversity of wine, where it's made, how it's different when it's made here versus here. And then some of the people, yourself included, who decide to make wine are usually pretty weird people.
Thank you.
Makes for interesting or really dedicated people, right? They tend to be, if you get a winemaker alone, or even the owner of a winery, you get them alone and let them geek out, it's frightening. I mean, they'll go full scale geek in a way that they wouldn't dare if there was somebody around them. And so stories are always about people. The best stories are always about people or interactions with people, and then interactions with the place. And it's still the same today.
I'm wondering, like, was that part of the motivation behind you starting Fermentation, your blog back in 2004? Was it to tell the stories that you would have been telling in a PR world, or the behind the scenes part of that, or was it a different motivation?
It was a different motivation. First, I love writers. I really do, and I was a voracious reader. but when I started working in public relations, I got to work with writers, and for me, that was very exciting. I always loved to learn about their process. I liked seeing how they put together sentences and how they turned a phrase. And so I fancied myself able to be able to do that too. But more importantly, to be honest with you, Jason, I just figured that everybody needed to know what I was thinking. And so I had to figure out a way to do that. And in 2004, the blogging software that was easy to use really started to emerge. And so I just started writing a blog, and I liked it so much. When I first started, for the first couple of years, I would write 2 or 3 things a day and publish.
Yeah, I went back and looked. I wanted to see what your first posts were on that blog. And one of the things that I noticed is that the second month that you were blogging, you had 56 posts in a month.
I know. It was just so no one else was writing about anything that I wanted to write about, right? And so it was clear sailing for me. It wasn't like there was any competition for people writing about this. And the audience kept growing, and I usually wrote about the way the wine business intersects with culture and society and media and that sort of thing. Nobody else was writing about that. So, and again, the audience was growing and growing. So I figured I was doing something right, and it just confirmed that, oh, indeed, people really wanted to know what I had to say. That was a conclusion that I drew. And so, I mean, over time, I think I've written probably 4,000 posts over the years. But it's been a real freeing process for me. Sometimes I just want to get online and say some things about some people who have been bad or nasty or hurt the wine business, and I have my own platform to do that, right? So why not? You know?
And so how much did you know at that time about who your audience was? I mean, this was an era when when all of us who were starting to write blogs, like there were a lot of comment blogs. And you did get to know your audience a little bit. Who was your audience?
It's been the same, actually. It's always been the same. It's the trade. I've never written for consumers. One of the reasons I've never written for consumers is my clients have always been the ones who were consumer facing. I didn't in any way want to compete with them. And one of the things I've never done is I've actually never written about my client. So if Tablas Creek was a client of mine, I wouldn't write about Tablas Creek, right? My job was to get other people to write about Tablas Creek. But what I could write about was I would learn something from you. I would learn something about the disposition of winemakers in winter, when there's a little bit less to do, and that might interest me. But I would write it to the trade and aim it at them. And so if I was writing about that or about the 3-tier system or about wine shipping or any of those things, it was always aimed at the trade, which is why I think I've always been pegged as sort of an advocate, which is accurate. That is accurate. I have been an advocate on behalf of the trade, but also consumers. Despite the fact that I haven't written about them or to them, rather.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is, and I want to talk more to you about this in a moment. I have a handful of questions about all of that advocacy work that you've done, but I think it ultimately is a story about how consumers are being taken advantage of by kind of obscure laws written by middlemen in some.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, it's been like that too for almost 90 years now.
Yeah.
Yeah. The concern of lawmakers and the concern of many in the wine industry is not for consumers. It is for tax revenue. It is for gatekeeping. It is for rent seeking. It is for propping up those people in the industry who have the ability to shape the laws through their interaction with lawmakers and through donations and campaign contributions. It's never been about serving the consumer. Rarely. Only maybe in the past 20 years and only occasionally have we seen laws and regulations change that favor the consumer. And I'm thinking here about direct consumer shipping laws. Right. And
even that, like, that's the result of a lot of writers like you and many others trying to shine a spotlight in some of the darker corners of what goes on in legislative rooms to the point that there is at least a perception of political pressure on the lawmakers to maybe vote in favor of the special interests against their constituents.
It's a real simple transactional process, Jason. I remember one of the things I do is I'm the executive director for the National Association of Wine Retailers, and one of the things NAWR does is they try to pass laws or get laws passed in states to allow out-of-state retailers to ship in. And so I got a bill introduced in Michigan to allow out-of-state retailers to ship to consumers there. And I was visiting the state and I was lobbying, and I sat down with one of the lawmakers at an old school country club outside of Lansing. I'm sitting down and I'm talking to him and I'm explaining the bill and why we'd really like his support. And he says to me, the wholesalers have given me $5,000 over the past couple of years. How much do you have for me? And he said it straight to my face. And it was so refreshing, right? Because that was always something that was sort of behind the scenes or implied and whatnot. Maybe your in-state lobbyist would suggest, maybe you give some money to this guy. But no, it was the lawmaker who said, they gave me this much. What do you got? And that's just the way the game is played, right? And that's also why consumers often don't win, because consumers don't give money like wholesalers do.
Right. Okay, I want to get back to that, but I did want to ask you about back on the idea of blogging. Like, one of the real contributions that I think that you made to the world of wine blogging was creating the Wine Blog Awards back in 2007. Yeah. And then you ran it yourself for a long time after that. I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about the decision to create that platform and what you felt like you got out of it?
By 2007, the wine blogging world was really starting to grow a lot. And one of the first things we discovered was there were a ton of voices out there that were really interesting and really compelling. And you realize immediately that without the blogging platform, we never would have heard these voices, right? So I wanted to make sure that really the best voices out there got heard. And I thought, well, why don't we give the best voices awards and then publicize the awards? And so that's why I started them. And we had a variety of different categories: best business blogger, best wine reviewer, best winery blog. You won best winery blog a couple times. And so we had all these different categories, and it did, and it got attention. And a lot of voices that really should have been recognized were recognized. And so I was very, very proud to have started that. And then I finally handed it off to the same folks who did the Wine Bloggers Conference.
And it didn't last for all that long after you handed it off. It was only another couple years, I think.
That's true. But interestingly, the blogging craze, whatever you want to say, it peaked around 2010, right? A lot of people were coming in to the wine blogging world, and the traditional writers were all dissing bloggers. It was funny. These guys don't have editors. They don't have anything to say. They're sloppy writers. And in some cases we were, right? But there were these really good writers. Alder Yarrow came out of blogging. Who else? Ellen, help me out. I'm having a senior moment. Ellen, damn it, she just released a book. Anyway, a variety of folks came out of blogging who are now, you see,
Elaine Chacon Brown.
Yes, thank you. God, that's terrible. Elaine, if you're watching, I apologize. So it peaked, though. Wine blogging peaked after everyone came into it around 2010. And the number of viewers and readers of blogs also started to decline in 2010, and that coincided with the rise of social media.
Right. And yet you continued to write your own blog and migrated it years ago from, were you on WordPress in the end, but to Substack? And I'm curious if you can talk about kind of the value to you of continuing to write that blog through kind of the hollow that happened afterwards. And I feel like there's now almost like a second renaissance of blogs. Anyway, can you talk about that process?
Sure. I saw early on, I looked at Substack, and it was a very, very compelling platform, and it allowed you to better interact with your readers. It also allowed me to easily monetize my writing, which I've done. Um, and I think you're right. I mean, there's a bit of a rush right now to Substack among wine writers. I think because they want to monetize what they're doing.
A lot of the other outlets a lot of the other paid outlets are really struggling. So
True. Media is fragmenting, continues to fragment, and it has really ever since Craigslist started to take all the ads away from daily newspapers. So it's a really neat platform, and there are some very, very good writers right now working on Substack. Um, a lot of times you find that their work is behind a paywall.
right.
My work is partially behind a paywall. So on Substack at Fermentation, every 2 out of 3 posts are behind a paywall, but that third one is free to everyone. And the reason I do that is, and I purposely try to make the most impactful and most interesting posts free to everyone, because if you want to know the economics of Substack, the way it works is most of your readers, most of your paying subscribers come from your free subscriber base, right? So I've got about 5,000 subscribers, the vast majority of which are free subscribers. But when I get a new paid subscriber, they've almost always been reading for a while as a free subscriber, and then they come over as a paid subscriber. So you want to increase the number of people who subscribe for free for any number of different reasons, because if you're a writer, you want to be read, but also the more free subscribers there are, the more paid subscribers you have. So I treat my Substack as a client, just as though they were a PR client. I give my Substack and that writing as much attention as I would any of the clients.
Cool. Okay, so you already mentioned the National Association of Wine Retailers. I think probably most of the audience that is watching this, if they're regulars for Tablas Creek, they're probably more familiar with the rules surrounding winery direct-to-consumer shipping than they are with retailer direct-to-consumer shipping, and it's very much not the same world. Can you talk a little bit about kind of some of the differences and what the state of play is now for retailers?
In 2005, the Supreme Court came down with the Granholm v. Heald Supreme Court decision. Changed everything. It said states can't discriminate against out-of-state shippers. And after that happened, the Wine Institute and Free the Grapes, 2 important organizations, really started to lobby in states to open up these states for winery to consumer shipping. A lot of times when they would introduce a bill into a state, it would say out-of-state wineries and retailers may ship into the state. The first thing that would happen after that is wholesalers would come in, and they wouldn't shut down the idea of winery shipping, but they would shut down the idea of retailer shipping. And the way they justified that was by saying that Supreme Court case was all about winery shipping. We can still discriminate against retailers. And so they took retailers out of the bill, and winery direct-to-consumer shipping started to flourish over the course of a decade as laws passed in a number of different states. I think we're at the point now where if you wanted to get licenses in every state that issued them for winery shipping, I think you'd have about 47 states, maybe 48 states that allow winery to consumer shipping. And this has been huge for the wine industry. I think maybe a third of the wineries in the country would shut down immediately if they couldn't ship direct. But retailers are only allowed to ship to 14 states legally. It's illegal in all 36 other states for them to ship. Now, in most of those states, in-state retailers can ship to consumers in the state, but out-of-state retailers can't. It's the exact same situation that existed for wineries prior to the 2005 Supreme Court decision. In 2019, there was another Supreme Court decision called Tennessee Wine v. Thomas. And in that decision, Justice Alito said, no. The idea of a non-discrimination principle that we saw in Granholm, that applies to retailers too. It's not just wineries. And so we were very excited, right? Because we figured that laws were going to change instantaneously. But wholesalers came up with, another reason to stop retailers. They said that having a retailer be inside a state in order to have the privilege to ship to people in that state was an essential feature of the 3-tier system. And if it's an essential feature of the 3-tier system, then we're allowed to discriminate, right?
I remember there was a footnote in the Granholm decision that said, like, the three-tier system is questionably legitimate or something along those lines that I always thought of as a very strange little.
Yeah, and I could get deep into details on that, but I'm not going to, uh, because I recognize exactly how obscure and boring that is. However, I will say that I had a meeting early this morning with some extraordinarily good constitutional attorneys um, about applying for cert in a case, applying to the Supreme Court in a case for retailer shipping, which is very exciting because it opens up the opportunity to open up retailer shipping if they take it. And then if we win, it gives me a chance to help write briefs and amicus briefs. I get to play an attorney on TV. So that's all a great deal of fun for me. And it's an important issue. So hopefully by the time I retire, retailers will be able to ship to more states. And it's important that retailers ship, and here's why. Yes, if they want wines from wineries in America, they can usually buy those and have them shipped. But when retailers can't ship to consumers, that means they can't receive shipments of imported wines.
Right.
Because only retailers sell imported wines, right? And it's only retailers who sell generally old, collectible, vintage wines, whether from domestic producers or imported producers, right? One of the websites I love is winebid.com, right? And you go on winebid.com, and the cool thing about this auction site is you can buy a bottle of 1985 Napa Cabernet for $15, right? And it's usually in pretty good condition. Or you can buy an old Tablas Creek, right? Maybe your second or third or fourth vintage, and it's like $25. Not that it shouldn't be worth more, but I mean, you can get just about anything you want at that site. You can buy a bottle at a time if you want, right? And you can buy DRC if you want from that website, from that auction house. But I mean, you can get an education by being able to have wine shipped to you. But WineBid is a retailer, so there's only certain states it can ship to. It's licensed as a retailer, so it's important that retailers be able to ship.
Yep. I have never understood why that same constitutional logic that dictated the Granholm decision would not automatically be applied to it. Like, if you read the logic, like, it is
Right.
it is all applicable.
It absolutely is, and the only reason that you recognize that and other people don't is you happen to be reasonable.
Thank you. Um, okay, so you've been described, and I think you sort of adopted this description yourself. You have it on your Fermentations blog and Substack as a muckraker, and I want you to share a little bit about, like, what that means to you and why you've embraced it.
Well, first of all, it's not. I'm not a self-described muckraker. Actually, it was Michael Steinberg, who used to write about wine for Slate, who described me that way. And he described me in that way because I was never afraid to name names or pull punches, right? So when the Wine and Spirit Wholesalers Association of America said something or released information that I thought was absurd, like, for example, they released a poll that said mothers are in favor of the three-tier system. Now, it's not the juiciest piece of information for a post. I don't know what is, right? And they really did do this. And so I was happy to talk about the executive director of WSWA or anyone else there and simply ridicule them and point out the absurdity of it. Or in other cases, more than happy to name names of those people who were actively trying to thwart consumers from getting the wines they want. And then really expose the absurdity of the three-tier system. And so I was always happy to do that and to name names and not pull punches. And I think that's why I got the reputation of being, quote unquote, a muckraker. But I'm absolutely sure that the three-tier system needs to be reformed in some very, very serious ways. It's absurd, for example, that a California retailer can buy wine directly from you and not use a wholesaler. But that retailer can't buy wine directly from an Oregon winery and have it shipped to them, right? And the problem with that is wineries or rather retailers are less able to diversify their offerings, which is really important right now, right? I mean, wine sales are down, retailers are hurting, everyone's hurting to a degree. Um, and so you have to be able to do whatever you can to attract an audience that will become champions for you um, and who will visit their dollars upon you over and over again because you have the wines that they want. And so that's the sort of thing that has to change. I think producers need to be able to sell directly to retailers and restaurants anywhere in the country. And so one of the things NAWR is doing is trying to open that up. So, for example, we have a lawsuit in New York that if we win, would allow retailers in New York to buy directly from you, and you could ship out a couple cases to them. And so we hope to change those kinds of laws in a variety of states, but that's seen as a direct attack on the three-tier system. And I would say that's an accurate description. That is. So.
Cool. Okay, so you also recently started a new daily email kind of news aggregator called The Spill, which is the account you're joining from.
Yeah.
And I would love you to talk a little bit about what the need was that you saw and what The Spill is for people who maybe don't know it.
So for many, 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 many years, people who are in the industry, they've relied on these emails that they get every morning from Wine Business, from Wine Industry Insight, from Wine Industry Advisor. And it's these emails that come and they have links to all the different trade news that happened in the last 24 hours. And we all of us in the industry, we read this, right? And it's how we learn about different things happening. And basically what these emails do is they curate stories from a wide variety of sources.
Right.
And for many, many years ago, it struck me that why isn't there something like this for consumers? And I went to a couple of the different people who send out these emails, and I said, listen, there's far more consumers than there are people who work in the trade. Why not a daily email that curates the consumer-facing news, not the trade news, but the consumer-facing news? And they said, no, it's too much work. It's hard to do. We have to market it. And so I decided not a couple years ago, actually, I decided maybe 4 or 5 months ago, after another person saying, no, I'm not going to do it myself.
Right.
It turned out that the technology was actually there. One of the things I don't do, well, first of all, The Spill is a free daily email that arrives in your email box, and it's essentially a wine magazine that you get every day. It has 20 to 30 different stories that it links to that have been published in Wine Enthusiast, Travel and Leisure, a variety of different blogs. I monitor somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 different sources. And then every day I pick 20 or so. It goes in the newsletter, and that goes out to the subscribers. Did I mention it was free? It's free. So in any case, the technology, turns out, is there for me to be able to do this without the help of AI, without spending more than an hour a day. And so now, it turns out there's a ton of really good consumer-facing articles out there that most people wouldn't see. Most people stick to 2 or 3 sources, and they don't get to see anything else. This is going to expose subscribers to a wide variety of writers and a wide variety of publications and a wide variety of perspectives. And it also gives me a chance to sort of champion really the best writers out there too. And that's something else I wanted to do.
It feels like a bit of a throwback to that kind of Wine Blog Awards.
In a way, yeah, in a way it is. So I'm very, very excited about The Spill. We started it 3 months ago. We're up to 1,500 subscribers. The goal is to get it to at least 5,000 within a year, so by next September. And I think we're going to get there. And the way these things work is they snowball. And it's all mailing lists like this. They end up snowballing. It starts small, it gets larger, more people hear about it, it gets passed around, it grows faster. And so that's sort of what I'm counting on. But it's exciting because there's never been anything like this before, and I get to do it. So I'm very excited. And so I'm very excited.
Cool. Okay. We are at half an hour, which it always surprises me that we get to half an hour as fast as we do when the conversation is good. I have one last real question for you, and then I'll ask you to share. We'll learn more. But the last real question I have is that I mean, this has been a tough couple of years for wine. There's certainly been a lot of news about the struggles of, and I'm curious from your perspective, like obviously working as an advocate for the wine that you work for, um, also aggregating the stories that you see. I'm curious, like what sorts of wineries or wines do you see as being successful, being able to kind of buck the overall trend in this moment?
Well, it's easiest to say which ones won't, right? You don't want to be selling $10 bottles of wine right now, unless you have the full force of Southern and Republic behind you, right? The the sales of low end wines has fallen through the floor. Reason that's happened is people who buy those wines, who tend to be a little bit lower income, it's very difficult for them right now. The economy is very difficult, and um, as they manage their disposable income, wine goes out first, right? So you don't want to be in the lower end. I think right now the sweet spot is a winery that's selling their wine somewhere between $20 and $50 a bottle, who maybe have a third of their distribution going through the three-tier system, going through wholesalers, and the rest is going direct. Whether or not they thrive is going to depend entirely on how they treat their direct consumer customers. Whether or not they survive or thrive is going to depend on whether or not they can find ways to draw people to their tasting room, because tasting room visitation has also dropped off across the board in almost every region. And there's a number of reasons why people aren't drinking as much wine now. I think the biggest reason is the economy. I think there's a lot of income insecurity right now. I think there's an affordability crisis right now. Now, the good thing about that is I think that it's a cyclical thing. I think this resolves itself as the economy resolves itself. And I think that as the economy gets better, wine sales get better. However, one thing that's not going to change is people are giving up alcohol for cannabis. No question about it. We're losing customers to cannabis, wine is. We're losing customers to ready to drink products. We're losing customers to, to hard kombucha and hard cider.
Right.
When I first got in this industry, it was beer, spirits, and wine. That was really it, right? There was maybe some sort of a Bartles and James things going on where there was something sweet in a bottle that was kind of like wine, and it was sort of an entry level thing. But now there's such a wide diversity of products that younger people in particular, aren't even getting to wine. Then the other issue that we're going to have to deal with, which is not going to go away, and it's going to continue to hurt wine sales, is the GLP-1 drugs, the Ozempic, whatnot. There's no question about it. It not only suppresses your appetite for food, but also for alcohol. That's going to continue to harm us as more and more people use Ozempic. I'm not advocating that people shouldn't use Ozempic. I think they should. I think it's going to bring down costs of healthcare for us all, but it's going to harm wine. So there's both a sort of a cyclical thing going on that I think can be resolved with the economy is better, but there's also some systemic things that are harming wine that I don't think get better.
Interesting. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Okay, so how do people who want to learn more about your either your marketing PR work or your writing or the spill, how do people learn more?
Okay, so for Wark Communications, for my my wine PR work, that's easy. That's warkcommunications.com, WARK communications.com. The spill is easy. You just go to thespill.net, and there's a place you put your email in there. And if you do that, I will send you a newsletter every single day, not counting Saturday and Sunday. If you want to read what I have to say, and as we know, everyone needs to know what I have to say, you can find me at Substack. You can just type into Google Tom Wark Fermentation Substack, and you'll find me. You don't need to pay to subscribe. If you want to pay to subscribe, I will be your best friend. And those are the ways you get in contact with me. So yeah, that's where we are.
Awesome. Well, Tom, thank you for taking a chunk out of your Wednesday afternoon to talk to me, and thank you for everything you do for the industry.
Thank you, Jason. Keep it up. Enjoy it down there. It looks beautiful.
Thank you. Okay. Here's everybody. This is my next to last conversation of the year. I will be back in 2 weeks. I will have Mathieu Perrin joining me. I try to have a Perrin join me for the last conversation of the year. I've done it the last few years. It feels like an appropriate thing for us at Tablas Creek. So I will see you all in 2 weeks. Tom, I hope to see you in real life sooner than later.
I hope so too. Take care.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.